Welcome back. Let's get back to discussing all things data. Earlier, we learned about what data is, its value to the project manager, and the different types of data a project manager works with. In this lesson, we'll discuss how to identify the most important data for your project, how to prioritize the data you collect, and how to effectively gather priorities from your stakeholders so that you're meeting your goals. Let's get started. Did you know that the average temperature for most humans is 98.6 degrees? So, if your temperature reached 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, there would likely be signals that something's not quite right, like a sweaty forehead, muscle aches, or even dehydration. Your brain would begin to receive signals that something is off because it's the brain's job to pay attention to the signals that indicate there's a problem threatening your overall health. That's how you should think about data when it comes to managing your project. There are all kinds of information and facts that you can gather as a project manager. But it's important for you to be aware of the signals that threaten the overall success of the project. A signal is an observable change, and it can help you to determine the overall health of your project and identify early signs that something isn't quite right. Being aware of the different types of data you have access to and knowing which signals to respond to are key to deciding what data is most important. Maybe you're asking yourself, how do I determine what data is important? Great question. As a project manager, it's up to you to look for signals and to prioritize data to deliver positive results. There are a couple of ways you can begin to do this. One way is to observe your team's productivity and output. Identify which tasks contribute most to the overall goal. This will help you determine the importance of which data points, in this case, tasks and activities, you should focus on. Secondly, prioritize the data or metrics that are most valuable to stakeholders. For example, let's say you have an ongoing project at a manufacturing company to release a portable home appliance by the third quarter. Your stakeholder is concerned about whether or not you'll meet the deadline. Okay, start by thinking, what data do you have about the project? You know that it's the first quarter and you're already $2,000 over budget. But you also know that you're 30 days ahead of schedule according to your burn-down chart, which measures time against the amount of work done and the amount of work remaining. You may think your project is running as scheduled, but there are additional things to consider. For one, the number of tasks has increased by 10% over the last 3 weeks because your stakeholders want to add more features to the appliance. And now your team's productivity is slowing down because they're starting to burn out from the late nights and long hours required to add in those new features. Now, how do you feel about meeting that third quarter deadline? Not so good, right? What do? You might be tempted to focus on the signal that you're $2,000 over budget. But if your stakeholders communicated that they're more concerned with meeting the deadline than they were about being over budget, then you'll want to keep an eye on key signals related to time and scope rather than budget. And then hone in on those signals to identify and prioritize areas to improve. The relevant data tells you you'll be able to meet the deadline provided that stakeholders stop requesting new product features that result in more tasks for your team to complete. You can use your productivity metrics to forecast how you'll manage an increase in scope with your team's current productivity rate and communicate this to your stakeholder. To avoid having to reset expectations with stakeholders again and again, you can keep your project plan up to date with the project's priorities and ensure that this information is accessible to everyone. Stakeholders can look to your project plan for a high-level overview of answers to important questions, success criteria, artifacts, and the overall health of your project. Remember, there are a lot of data points available to you. Using signals, focusing on the tasks that have the biggest impact on the project goal, and aligning to your stakeholders' priorities are a good way to help you prioritize the right tasks. So now that you identified data and prioritized it so that you're working to meet business needs, the next thing to determine is how to use the data to make better decisions. We'll cover that when we connect in the next video.